My name is Lyra Dawson. I'm the eldest daughter in a picture-perfect family from Vermont. A place where every photo on the wall includes everyone's face, except mine. I paid the mortgage on the house they called home. I wired money in the middle of the night so they wouldn't lose power in the winter. I carried the weight of the entire family on my back for nearly a decade, only to hear my mother stand before 52 people and say, "Callie is the one who truly loves us. The other one never did anything." I quietly walked away. 15 hours later, their vacation fell apart, because I disappeared. Along with the accounts, the credit cards, the house, and the person who once carried them, whose name they never bothered to say aloud. Have you ever been written out of the story your family tells? If you know that feeling, leave a comment. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with me to hear what happened when I decided to let them stand on their own for the first time. I don't remember exactly when I was first asked for help. Maybe it was the year I turned 24 when I had signed my first full-time contract at an accounting firm. I was still celebrating buying my first pair of shoes that didn't have to wait for a clearance sale. Mom called, her voice light like she was trying not to bother me. "Your dad got a notice. They're threatening to foreclose on the house unless we cover the overdue amount within 30 days. We can't pull it together in time." I wired over my entire year-end bonus, the money I had planned to use to finish off my student loans. Not a single person asked if I could make rent that month. And not a single thank you followed. My mother sent a single text. "Did you send it?" "Yeah, I see it now." Thank goodness. In the years that followed, it became routine. Every time Callie switched jobs, from part-time teaching to baking at a little shop down the road, then quitting again to focus on writing, her phone bills or credit card charges stopped showing up on her account and started showing up on mine. Mom would always say, "She's the emotional one. She's not great with money, but she's always present, always there." I remember her saying that during Christmas dinner when I had arrived from Boston, still holding the custom-made apple pie, because Callie's allergic to walnuts. "And you're never around," she added without looking at me. I gave a small smile and cut the pie into quarters. "It took me 4 hours to drive here, Mom." "Well, Callie stays overnight. She sacrifices a lot." I wondered if anyone in that house ever thought of sacrifice another way. Like skipping the only vacation of the year to pick up extra shifts, just to cover hospital bills after Dad dislocated his knee? Or missing the grand opening of the company I built from scratch to drive home and fix the leaky pipe Callie said no one else could figure out? In the family photos covering the hallway, I'm nearly always off-center. In some, half my body is cut off, either because the frame was too small or because whoever trimmed it didn't think I mattered. One time I asked directly, "Mom, don't you see my head got cropped out of the photo in the living room?" He shrugged. "Oh, that's the frame. Besides, your face didn't look very happy in that one." Not happy? Maybe because I had flown in right after managing a last-minute audit crisis, hadn't slept an hour, and still got pulled into the photo shoot, so everyone would be present. Callie was always in the center. Soft lighting. Bright smile. One time she joked, "I always get forced to be the center of attention. Can't dodge it." Mom laughed heartily. "Well, you're the warm little flame in this house, aren't you?" Me. I was the power line. The one paying for the gas so they could have a fireplace. The one who mailed birthday gifts on time, even during mind-numbing boardroom meetings. I learned not to expect them to remember. I sent birthday texts first. Called when the weather was bad in Vermont. Mailed Thanksgiving gifts to the front porch. Even though sometimes I wondered, if I went silent for a year, would anyone notice? One time I tried. That year I skipped the usual transfer for the Christmas tree. I stayed silent about the holiday. Said nothing about dinner. On Christmas Eve I got a single message from Callie. "I thought you were handling the tree this year?" And I did what I always did. I apologized and placed a rush order that night. The tree arrived the next morning on the 25th. They sent back a photo. I wasn't in it. But I saw the tree. And I saw Callie smiling brightly in the center, holding a mug of cocoa with Mom fixing her hair. I zoomed into the corner of the frame, where a card read, "Merry Christmas, from Callie family." I didn't know who I was in that photo. Wasn't even sure I belonged to that family. But I saw more clearly than ever. In that house I was the shadow beneath someone else's light. I don't know if I walked in at exactly the wrong moment, or if it was already too late to turn back. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had dropped by my parents' house to bring some insurance paperwork they asked me to print. Old home documents. Callie had left her phone in the living room. It lit up on the coffee table with an incoming call from Jen, PTA. I was about to place it back on the shelf when it auto-answered on speaker. Some feature I'd never used. But Callie? She was always great at optimizing her tech experience. And then I heard my mother's voice. Clear. Unfiltered. Not whispered. Don't worry too much. This house will be yours one day, not Lyra's. It's not really hers. She sends money. On the other end, Jen's voice replied gently, "She's your sister, isn't she?" And Callie laughed. "Lyra? He's different. There's no real family bond with her. He's always cold. Like someone who accidentally walked into a family dinner she wasn't invited to." I froze. My shoes were still on, dirt from the backyard still clinging to the soles. My mom was in the kitchen one wall away. Callie was upstairs. And me, the one who had paid the property tax on that house last year to keep it from being seized, was being called an outsider. I stepped back. Then another step. Pulled my phone from my coat pocket. Lowered my head. And quietly walked out of the house. A week later, while reviewing my bank statements to handle the home insurance payment, I found a suspicious transaction. A notary office in Rutland, where I had never been, had finalized a civil asset transfer. The name on the updated ownership record, Callie Dawson. Me. No confirmation notice. No request for authorization. I pulled up old emails. 3 years ago I had bought that house to bail out my parents, after they missed critical payments and nearly lost everything. And yet now my signature appeared on the new paperwork. Neat, consistent, every stroke in place. Except, it wasn't mine. I went to see my mother. No warning. I knocked on the door near dusk when the lights were already on but the curtains hadn't been drawn yet. She opened the door wearing a light fur coat, a cup of tea in hand. "Oh, you came without telling me. What did you do with the house documents?" She paused briefly, then turned and walked back inside without inviting me in. I followed her. It was a bit of formalizing. "That house still belongs to the family, Lyra." "No, Mom. It's legally mine. I bought it back from the bank to save it from foreclosure. I paid for it. It's in my name. And someone forged my signature to transfer it to Callie." Mom set her tea down on the table, exhaling as if I were a child making a big fuss. "You still have a good job, a nice apartment. Callie has nothing. She lives here, takes care of us. She needs stability." "Stability doesn't mean stealing, Mom. Don't use such heavy words, Lyra." I looked her straight in the eye. "You know I heard that phone call the other day, right?" She turned away. "You said I lacked a sense of family. Callie called me a stranger. And now you've taken property in my name to give your real family a sense of stability. You're overreacting." "No, I'm being clear. You've said I live far away, that I'm not close to the family. But you never once asked why I had to live that way. Because I understood something, being close doesn't mean being loved." I stepped toward the door, feeling hollow. But my mind had already begun making plans. I had stayed silent most of my life. Maybe it was time they learned how to live without me. I started with a meeting with Natalie Crane, a close friend from college, now an attorney specializing in estate and trust law. Without saying much, I handed her a copy of the house transfer and a photo of the signature supposedly from me. Natalie examined each stroke of ink, then looked up. "Lyra, this signature's forged. This case could go to court." But instead of filing a lawsuit right away, I asked, "Is there a way to strip all their access to the property without causing a scene?" She frowned. "You mean, disappear legally?" I pressed my lips together. Not to run away. To stop. To stop funding a family shadow I never truly belonged to. We began. Quietly. I transferred ownership of the house from my personal name to a limited liability company, North Birch Holdings, a legal entity I had set up years ago for property investment but never used. Natalie handled the paperwork. Everything was legal, discreet, and nearly impossible for my family to trace without legal help. I shut off all automatic payments: electricity, water, internet, cable, heating. The emergency use credit card I had given Callie was canceled on a Monday morning. I didn't leave a message. Not a single explanation. I also deactivated all shared accounts like Netflix, Amazon Family, even Spotify, Platforms they still logged into using my email and never once asked if I wanted to join the fun. I withdrew the entire balance from the joint account I'd set up after Mom's shoulder surgery. That account was supposed to cover emergency expenses, though it mostly paid for things like concert tickets, yoga classes for Callie, or garden string lights. Natalie executed everything with legal precision, but it still left the house feeling as if it had lost its soul. I left the family group chat. The last message in there was from Mom. Will Callie be able to handle the gas bill this month? Right above it was a gift from Callie, a cat in a birthday hat. No one asked how I was doing. My name didn't come up, not even once. And I, as always, was the quiet absence on the sidelines. The difference was, this time I let that silence grow large enough for them to be forced to see it. I deleted my Facebook account, hid my LinkedIn, locked my Instagram. My main email still worked, but I moved the entire family folder to a separate filter with no notifications. That's how I slowly pulled myself out of every hallway I used to tiptoe through to avoid bothering anyone. A few days later, I got a message from Callie. Just one line, "Internet's out. Do you know anything about it?" Then came one from Mom. "Sweetheart, something's wrong with the utility account. I tried logging in and it's locked." Then 3 missed calls. One voicemail from Dad sounding awkward. "Can you give me a call back? Just wanted to ask a few things." I set my phone down. The messages stayed. I didn't erase them. Didn't shut the door. I stayed quiet. A week later, I returned to the old house on a light rainy afternoon. I parked across the street, wore a baseball cap and a thick coat, and sat in the car watching through the window. The house was dark. The porch light was still on, but dim. The front curtain was askew, leaving a gap. There was no music from the smart speaker. No glow from the living room TV that usually stayed on all night when I used to come home late. Something felt still in the bones of that house. As if it had realized it was no longer held together by trust, but by bank wires. And I had pulled the plug. I stared at the wooden door for a long time, the place I used to wait for Dad to open holding a warm apple pie. Now it was bare. And I thought, I don't have to knock anymore. That door was never really open for me. I drove away. Quietly. I named the new legal center Eleanor's Promise. It was after my grandmother, the only one in the family who ever looked at me without comparison, without pressure, without bringing up Callie every time I did something right. She passed when I was 14, leaving behind an old piano and a handwritten note. "Lyra, you don't have to become someone else to be worthy of love." I don't know how long I kept that note. But I do know, on the day I signed the papers to buy back the family house, which no longer felt like home, I also signed off on another financial plan. A support center for women facing financial abuse. No fancy office. No flashy sign. A 3-story red brick building in an old neighborhood in Worcester, Massachusetts, where the rent was still low enough to start something real. I used the same savings Mom once promised to set aside for my dowry, then went silent when she transferred the house to Callie, to renovate the ground floor. A meeting room, a private counseling room, a small kitchen for volunteers to have lunch, and a bookshelf stocked with free resources. How to reclaim financial control after divorce. Understanding your bank statements. Shared blood doesn't mean shared ownership. Victor Reyes was the first person I called. Back at my old firm, he was the strategy director, the one people turned to when things got messy, the one who helped me navigate a state-level finance scandal back in 2019. We were never close, but there was something similar between us. A precision that felt cold but wasn't unkind. When I told him the idea for the center, he didn't ask, why? He asked, what's the starting budget? And how soon do you want to be financially independent? I smiled faintly. It had been a long time since someone called me, you like that, without expectation or condescension. Victor simply used the pronoun that matched my age without attaching judgment. He came in the second week after we launched, carrying a spreadsheet nearly 2 pages long and a collection of legal contract templates for nonprofit consultants. "I'm not great with outreach," he said while adjusting the projector, "but if you need help with operations, internal audits, or long-term strategy, call me." I placed a cup of coffee in front of him and said, "You don't have to help me. I'm fine." He didn't argue. But from that day on, every Tuesday and Friday, Victor came in. He sat in the side conference room, answered emails, reviewed grant templates, and never once asked what happened with my family. I knew he could see it clearly. But he respected my silence. The first week, a woman around 50 walked in, wearing an old sweater, carrying a paper bag filled with bank statements and medical bills. I asked, but she said nothing. Her answer came as a slow, tired sigh, the kind that says more than words ever could. "Does your husband know you're here?" She shook her head. There was a time when I truly believed I needed him to keep breathing. Now I just need to know. I can live without having everything taken from me. You can. I reprinted her statements, showed her how to close the secondary credit card opened under her name. A few weeks later, a group of law students applied for internships. They brought young energy, sometimes a bit chaotic, but full of idealism. One girl in the group, her name was Tara, asked me during lunch, "Where did you work before this?" I couldn't find any record. I smiled. I deleted some old footprints. Sometimes deleting is the way to start again, but this time with your hands on the wheel. "So you're a lawyer?" I shook my head. No. My name was the one they always left out, right in the place I called home. The first message came from the bank. It was a copy of a legal document Natalie had forwarded to me after the bank's representative contacted her about a mortgage that had gone unpaid for 3 consecutive months. They needed to know if the owner intended to intervene, or if the foreclosure process should proceed according to the law. I confirmed with a short sentence, "We will not intervene." On the other end, I knew things were far from quiet. Callie's power was cut during the first week of January, when icy winds swept down from Lake Champlain and froze everything overnight. Mom called for help, not to me but to the power company, because she couldn't log into the online account I used to pay from. Dad tried to withdraw money from the secondary credit card, the one under my name, but it was declined twice, then locked by the system for suspicious activity from an unfamiliar device. Callie posted a plea in a local community group. "Does anyone know where to rent a space heater cheap? Our power's out and the heating system isn't working." Someone replied in the comments, "That big house on the corner of Maple? That one's short on money." A few days later they came looking for me. I was at a legal workshop in Boston. But Victor was there along with Tara and the student group. When I returned, Victor simply placed a folded piece of paper and a printout from the security camera on my desk. 3 people stood at the center's entrance. Callie wore my old coat. I recognized it from the sleeves I had once patched. Mom had a thin scarf on, clearly not warm enough for the cold. Dad lingered behind them, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. The paper they brought was a messy handwritten note. "We need to talk. It's serious. You can't keep disappearing like this. The house is about to be taken. Your parents need you. Callie needs you." Victor told them I wasn't there. That the center did not handle private family matters. And that if they wished to send me anything, it must be in writing, left in the mailbox by the gate. Before leaving, Mom paused in front of the signboard, unmoving for a long moment. Then she noticed the engraved line below, "Eleanor's promise, for those who were once forgotten." I didn't need to be there to picture her face when she saw Grandma's name. She was the only one who used to carry a photo of me in her wallet. And in their current home, I heard from Victor, there was only one photo left on the altar for Eleanor. In it, I was 13, sitting next to her, both arms wrapped around a piano, head tilted in a smile. The photo had once been trimmed at the bottom, to fit the frame. But my face remained whole. Perhaps because it wasn't a family photo. It was one of me and the last person who ever called me Lyra without conditions. I knew they had begun to realize. Not because they lost a daughter, but because they lost convenience. They lost a financial rescue line they never acknowledged. They lost a place to lay blame when things in the house fell short. And when all of it disappeared, they didn't see me. They saw a void. A house can still have walls, a roof. But if you can't live in it, can't stay warm, can't cook, can't pay the bills, is it still a home? I used to ask myself that question. Years ago. Now, it's their turn to answer. Callie came on a Tuesday morning just as the center opened. The fog hadn't cleared, the tile floor still damp and cold, and the kettle was softly clicking in the back kitchen. I was sorting through last week's consultation folders when the doorbell rang. Urgently, not like someone politely seeking help, but fast, almost panicked. I opened the door. And there stood my sister, frail, dark circles under her eyes, her hair tied hastily with an old rubber band. She wore a baggy hoodie, the sleeves torn, pant hems soaked with half-melted snow. Seeing Callie like that, I had to admit, my heart sank for a moment. Then she dropped to her knees. No words, no sobbing, no theatrics like I used to see when we were little. Please, her voice was hoarse. They don't have anything left. Dad coughs all night. Mom hasn't gotten out of bed in 3 days. The house is cold, there's no power, the bank's taking everything. One hand on the door handle, I stayed rooted, unsure what to feel next. Cold wind drifted in behind her, chill and hollow, like something left over from a winter that had lasted too long. I asked slowly, clearly, then why? When Mom stood in front of 52 people and said only one child truly loved her, why did you stand there and smile? Her face was so close to the floor I couldn't see her expression. A tear hit the tile. I didn't expect her to say that. I thought, maybe she was emotional and that made you happy? I cut in. Silence fell in the room. I stepped forward and knelt in front of her. Not to comfort, but to look my sister in the eye. You came because your parents are sick. Because you can't pay the bills. You need help. But you didn't come here because you think you were wrong. Isn't that true? Callie looked up. I was wrong, she whispered, but if I say it, everyone will hate me. They'll think I betrayed our parents. Maybe. But that's the only condition. If you want my help, you have to tell the truth. No excuses. No edits. In front of everyone. Callie frowned, her lips trembling. Why do you need that? You want to humiliate me? No. I need you to face what you helped create. And I need everyone to hear it from your mouth, not some online post or half-told rumor. She went silent again. I stood, placed a towel on the nearby table. Wipe your face. Think it over. I don't need an apology. But if you still want to ask for help, bring the truth with you. I walked away, leaving her sitting quietly on the cold tile floor. A simple request: stop building stories I was never invited into. The meeting was held on a Saturday afternoon, in the main community room at the town center. I chose that place because it was neutral, far enough from the old house that no one could blame sentimental memories, but close enough they couldn't refuse the invite because of the weather. I didn't invite anyone. Callie did. She emailed, called, texted family group chats, even knocked on doors. I let her do it on her own. Because that was the one part one couldn't do for her anymore. That day, rare sunlight broke through the winter sky. Snow melted slowly in the parking lot, leaving shimmering streaks under everyone's shoes. I arrived early, sat in the back row, wore a light gray turtleneck, no makeup. I didn't want to be noticed. But I knew I wouldn't be ignored. About 40 people showed up. Some distant relatives I'd only met at Grandma's funeral. A few whose names I couldn't recall but remembered their faces from childhood birthdays, sitting in corners with plates of cake. Everyone came for the same reason. Things had gone too far to pretend not to see. At the front of the room, Callie clutched the microphone, rigid, unmoving, as if her body didn't quite belong there. Her knit dress was wrinkled, the collar slightly off, and one hand kept gripping the hem. She looked down at the floor, then slowly lifted her gaze, her voice beginning to shake. I know I'm not the one who should be up here speaking. But today I have to do this. The entire room fell silent. Only the wooden floor creaked under the feet of someone arriving late. Lyra, she turned toward me, for the first time meeting my eyes since the day she knelt. You're the reason this family even survived. From the house we used to live in to winter nights with heat. From school fees I couldn't afford to Mom and Dad's medicine. A few people in the room began to whisper to each other. We used to call you a stranger. Took your help for granted. Even smiled when others erased your name from photos, from thank yous, from shared memories. Callie's voice broke. I was the one in the middle who got the most but also let you carry the most. I saw my mother sitting in the third row, clutching a fabric bag on her lap, eyes filled with tears. My father sat beside her, head bowed low, hands clasped, saying nothing. Callie took a breath, trying to steady herself. All of us owe you an apology. And more than that, we owe you the truth. I hadn't planned to say anything. But my body stood up, almost on its own. I didn't stand up out of anger. I wasn't there to teach anyone a lesson. I rose because there's a space between confession and redemption. And I needed to stand in it, at least once, that I needed to close for myself. I walked up without taking the mic. I stood at the edge of the stage, loud enough for everyone to hear. I didn't need a microphone or a public apology. I came for something quieter and harder, the truth. What I need is for all of you to learn not to repeat this with someone else. The quiet child in the family. The relative cropped out of every photo. The girl given the house key but never told she belonged. I didn't go back to the old house. Even when the bank officially reclaimed the property and sent a letter offering me priority to buy it back at below market price, I quietly ignored it. I didn't need the roof that once sheltered a whole family, but never made room for me to be myself. Instead, I bought a small wooden cabin by Mirror Lake, about an hour's drive from the city. No neighbors next door. No traffic noise. Just the wind weaving through pine trees, the soft splash of water against rocks, and birds calling to one another from the forest edge each morning. The cabin is about 800 square feet, but it's enough for a reading nook, a cozy little kitchen, and a row of herbs by the kitchen window. Every morning I make coffee with a brown ceramic filter, the one I bought but never dared to use back at home because it looked too different. Now it's the one thing that makes the kitchen feel like it's mine. I still work at Eleanor's Promise. 3 days a week, I drive into the city to counsel women breaking free from families that squeezed them under the name of love. The rest of the time I work remotely, writing financial guides, designing training programs, and sometimes simply listening. One autumn afternoon when the maple leaves had turned amber, Callie came. She didn't call ahead. But she didn't bring desperation this time. Only a 3-year-old girl with curly brown hair, bright eyes, named Eliza. When I opened the door, Eliza looked up at me and asked, "Auntie Lyra?" "It's me," I said. Behind her, Callie held a paper bag of cookies, the wind tinting her face with a soft red. We were passing through. Eliza kept asking to stop by. I invited them in. Eliza quickly ran to my reading corner, where I kept a stack of old comics from college. She picked one with a fox in a sweater on the cover, climbed into the armchair, and said nothing else. Callie walked around the cabin, her eyes scanning the bookshelves, the glass jars labeled lavender, oregano, thyme. She asked nothing about my life, offered no explanations for the years in between. Instead, she handed me a small envelope. "I know you don't need this, but it's what I've saved from my new job. It's not much, but it's from me. Not through anyone else. Thank you." Callie looked at me for a long moment, then softly said, "I didn't get it before, why you never came back. But maybe it wasn't the family you left. It was the place that stopped feeling like home." When evening fell, Callie helped Eliza into her coat, ready to leave. Before stepping out the door, the little girl turned around and reached out to me. "Next time, will you tell me the fox story again?" I knelt down and touched her hand. "As long as you still want to hear it, I'll keep telling it." Callie looked at me, eyes wet. "I know I still have a lot to do to make things right. I'm not asking to be forgiven right away, but I won't disappear again." The door closed behind them. The cabin fell silent once more. But it was a peaceful kind of silence, not the cold one I had swallowed my entire life. I went back to my desk and opened the draft page for a new support program for single women after divorce. In the corner of the screen, the desktop background was a photo of the lake behind the house. The place I chose to rebuild my life, not with bricks and mortar, but with a promise I once read as a child beside an old piano. To live a life that doesn't need applause, to still feel worthy. The workshop took place on a Sunday morning at a small community library tucked in the old district of Burlington. Dark wooden walls, glass windows pouring in sunlight, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the worn paper scent of books read 100 times. No cameras, no event backdrops, a circle of wooden chairs arranged close together, enough for 15 people. Mostly women of all ages, a few with young kids in tow. I arrived early, laying out some printed handouts on the table. How to identify financial abuse, how to read a bank statement, a list of places offering free legal aid. The kinds of things I wish I had known earlier. Back when I still believed not belonging was normal. While I was jotting notes on the board, a girl around 9 came up to me. She wore an oversized hoodie, pant cuffs rolled up twice, and clutched a wrinkled sketchbook. She tilted her head and asked in a small but genuinely curious voice, "Are you a lawyer?" I paused, turned around, and smiled. "No. I'm someone who used to be called a nobody." She blinked, then nodded as if she understood without needing to fully understand. Then she returned to her seat and kept drawing faint pencil lines on her paper. A little house in the woods with warm yellow light glowing from its windows. I shared how to stop letting others define your worth by distance, money, or how often you show up at Thanksgiving dinner. I talked about the credit card that used to be the emergency lifeline for my family but turned me into the outsider with conditions. About the family photos that had my face cropped out. About the times I gave quietly and no one thought a thank you was needed. I needed to be more patient, more humble, more agreeable. Until I realized, sometimes being agreeable makes it easier for others to ignore you. After the session, a few people stayed behind. A young woman named Claire came up to me, her eyes clear and determined. I want to start over. Like you did. I saw a reflection of myself in her. The early days of stepping out of a family I once thought I was obligated to keep from falling apart. Then don't wait for permission, I said. She held my hand for a long time. Not a polite handshake, but the kind of touch from someone clinging to their last thread of hope. When I returned to the cabin, the sky had dimmed. Red leaves scattered across the front steps. The lake in the distance lay still like a mirror. I stepped up, opened the old wooden door, and a soft yellow light spilled out from inside. I set my bag on the chair, boiled water, and sat in my favorite spot by the window, where I could see the lake and the old maple tree I planted last year. A soft chime announced a new email. It was from a high school student who had joined the mentorship program. She wrote, Lyra, I know I'm not the biological child of the family raising me, but after hearing you speak, I don't feel invisible anymore. I placed my fingers on the keyboard, then stopped. No need to reply right away. Not because she wasn't important, but because I understood that for those who've been erased, the most precious thing isn't always an answer. It's the feeling of being seen. I stood up, turned off the kitchen light, and gently pulled the curtain. Outside, snow had begun to fall softly. Inside the small cabin, the warm yellow light still spilled out, not for recognition but so that anyone who needed it would know they could step inside. Have you ever been treated like an outsider in your own family? Have you ever quietly sacrificed without your name mentioned, without a single word of thanks? I know each of us has a private corner that others don't see, and sometimes the only thing we truly need is to be acknowledged. If this story reminded you of yourself, or of someone you may have forgotten, please leave a comment. I'll read every word because I believe no one should go through life unnoticed and no one should be left out, just because they never asked for anything. And if stories like this matter to you, hit follow so you won't miss the next honest chapters about real life, real families, and people who were once silent, but are no longer invisible. Thank you for listening.